وزير خارجية بولندا رادوسواف شيكورسكي، أهلا بك في لإرم نيوز. دعني أبدأ في البداية مما جرى في سوريا. كيف تنظرون إلى ما جرى مؤخرا، وما هو المستقبل الذي ترونه لهذه البلاد؟
Of course, the situation is still very uncertain. We sympathized with the people of Syria when they originally demanded more say over their lives and a more inclusive government. We followed with horror the civil war, the atrocities, the foreign interventions. We don't quite yet know what to make of the people who've unseated Assad. So we are reserving our judgment. We have associated ourselves with the statement by the EU High Representative for Foreign and Security Policy, but we also obviously grieve for the victims of the civil war. We are appalled by the atrocities that are being unearthed, and we hope that Syria will stabilize itself, will stay united, and will eventually have a more inclusive form of government.
نعم سيد شيكورسكي، يعني هل ستعترف بولندا بالنظام الجديد في سوريا أم لا؟
As Poland, we don't recognize governments. We recognize states. And of course, we recognize Syria. We have diplomatic relations with Syria. And we hope that conditions will soon be established so that our ambassador could return to Damascus. We also keep in touch with the very few Polish citizens in Syria. We had appealed to Polish tourists to leave Syria previously, but hopefully things will improve.
برأيك كوزير للخارجية ومسؤول أوروبي، هل تعتقد أن روسيا تركت بشار الأسد وحيدا باعته أم ماذا حصل برأيك؟
Well, obviously they reduced their support for Assad, and as a result the regime fell, which I think will be a very good thing not only for Syria but also for Africa, because it's from their bases in Syria that the Russians were projecting power and sending mercenaries to undermine governments all over Africa. So I hope all that nefarious activity is now limited.
نعم، هناك عملية بناء للجدار على الحدود مع بيلاروسيا وأيضا مع كالينيغراد الروسية. برأيك كيف يمكن لهذا الجدار أن يحفظ أمن بولندا أو الدول الأوروبية؟
Well, for many years, the border between Poland and Belarus was unguarded. There was no physical barrier because our border guards and the Belarusian guards collaborated smoothly. But we now have an organized operation by Belarus and Russia. People are being recruited in Africa, in Iraq, in Afghanistan, actually in Syria as well, and taken to Moscow, then bused to Belarus, trained in how to cross the border, also how to fight with Polish border guards, and one of our soldiers was killed. And then until recently, they were being picked up by people smugglers on the Polish side and usually taken to Germany. We are now completing a border fence, and the number of attempted crossings has dropped by 90%. You know, countries have borders, consulates, visas, border guards for a purpose. Namely, it is up to us to decide who may come and who may not come. This is not just a commercial operation. We were a victim of aggression by Russia and Belarus by means of recruited migrants.
نعم سيد شيكورسكي، يعني هل يعني بناء هذا الجدار أن فرص السلام مع روسيا بعيدة المنال اليوم أم ماذا؟
Well, walls are designed to protect. We are only protecting ourselves from an aggression that is coming from outside, namely from a Russia that is trying to rebuild the Russian Empire. Russia has border treaties with us, a ratified border treaty with Ukraine. and yet she crossed that border with tanks and invaded an independent country. And it's trying to affect the politics of Europe by means of forcing mass migration into the EU, and we are not going to agree to that.
يعني بعد خيبة الأمل في التعاطي مع ألمانيا تتجه اليوم بولندا إلى الدول الإسكندنافية وأيضا دول البلطيق. هل يعني ذلك أن فعلا أوروبا اليوم ربما تواجه انقساما معينا أم لا؟
I don't think so. We are all members of NATO, where of course America plays a leading role, and we are also coordinating our policy as the European Union. We have just created the post of the Defense Commissioner of the EU. I hope we give him serious money, tens of billions of euros, to rebuild Europe's defense industry. We are preparing a reinforced brigade as a rapid reaction capacity. We've had military operations under the EU flag in the Horn of Africa, in sub-Saharan Africa, and so on. We hear President Trump when he says that Europe needs to take more responsibility for its own security, and it's happening.
سيد شيكورسكي، يعني هناك بعض التناقضات من قبل أو من وجهة نظر الروس. في قمة السويد أعلن المشاركون عن دعم أوكرانيا لناحية إنتاج السلاح وغير ذلك، وأيضا دعم أوكرانيا للدخول إلى حلف شمال الأطلسي والاتحاد الأوروبي. كيف يكون ذلك وروسيا تعتبر أن دخول أوروبا إلى الناتو والاتحاد الأوروبي هو من أقوى الأسباب لاستمرار الحرب في أوكرانيا؟
No, Russia started the war because it wants Ukraine, because Ukraine used to be its colony, and it wants to re-establish control over a colony. And the Ukrainian people have said no, and they are bravely fighting. We are just helping them. Most of our countries voted at the UN to condemn the Russian act of aggression, and that puts a duty on us to take countermeasures against an act of aggression. You know, if we all started changing borders by force because we have a minority on the other side of the border, it's a recipe for a war of everyone against everyone else. Ukraine determines whether she wants to be a member of the European Union, not Russia. That's what being an independent country means. Russia has security interests, but so does Ukraine. Ukraine's first security interest is not to be invaded by a bigger neighbor.
هل تعتقد أنه لن يكون هناك خطوط حمراء فيما يخص دعم أوكرانيا في الفترة المقبلة؟ أتحدث عن فترة ترامب الرئاسية، أم أن الأمر أو الوضع سيكون مختلفا؟
Well, we have international law. A victim of aggression is allowed to defend herself with equipment that friends and allies supply. I hope that President Trump tells Vladimir Putin frankly and in the straightforward manner for which he's famous, that what he did was a terrible criminal mistake, and he needs to end this war because he's destroying Ukraine, but he's also ruining Russia. You know, part of the reason why the Assad regime fell was that Russia sent troops to fight in Ukraine and was unable to continue to support Assad. That means Russia is running out of resources to continue this cruel occupation.
سيد شيكورسكي، بالحديث عن الناتو أو الاتحاد الأوروبي، تتولى بولندا اليوم أو في الأول من يناير رئاسة الاتحاد الأوروبي. هل تعتقد أن ذلك سيكون فرصة لتخفيف التوتر بين الاتحاد الأوروبي من جهة وأيضا الولايات المتحدة من جهة أخرى؟
Well, the United States are our biggest ally and a biggest trade partner. We are the biggest cross-investors in each other's economies. And we think the relationship is very good. It's mutually beneficial. The United States has a surplus in services, you know, Hollywood, social media. We have a surplus in goods. Roughly, it's balanced. So we are not going to start revising this relationship. And I hope we don't have to, I hope President Trump comes to the same conclusion. You know, we have a saying in Europe, every US administration learns Russia and Europe afresh.
فيما يخص رئاسة الاتحاد الأوروبي، ما هي الأهداف أو الهدف الرئيسي لبولندا خلال هذه الفترة الرئاسية؟
We need to be more self-reliant in the area of defense and in the area of security more generally. Civil defense, but also food security, also energy security. Russia's business model was to sell its oil and gas to Europe. We were Russia's biggest and most lucrative market for oil and gas. Unfortunately, Russia chose to start the biggest war in Europe since World War II and proved to be an unreliable energy supplier, which is why we are now buying LNG from the Gulf and from the United States. And we need to develop more secure routes of delivery, more storage capacities, and more new sources of energy.
فيما يخص إذا أردنا أن نتحدث عن الخلاف أو الإشكال ربما بين الاتحاد الأوروبي ودونالد ترامب، يعني دونالد ترامب يحث الدول على زيادة الاستثمار في مجال الدفاع، ويريدها أن تكون 3% نسبة الإنفاق على الدفاع، وبولندا طبعا تنفق 4.7%. هل يزيد ذلك من الثقة بين بولندا وترامب، وبالتالي سيكون عاملا مهما في المصداقية بينكما؟
I think so. We are the biggest spender in NATO in proportion to GDP. We are doing what Donald Trump was asking for when he was first president and more. So I expect him to put Poland as an example to follow. But European defense is also important because it can't be up to Poland to defend the rest of Europe. You know, it has to be a more balanced effort. So yes, we need to show to Donald Trump that we've heard him and that we are doing the right thing. And we need to re-industrialize in the area of defense.
نعم، وزير خارجية بولندا رادوسواف شيكورسكي، شكرا جزيلا لك على هذا اللقاء.